I don't like cynical cash grabs. I never have, and I probably never will. Howling 3, also known as Howling Echoes, is a blatant, cynical cash grab. Granted, Gary Bradner did write this book, but this book makes no sense, and remarkably, stuff looks similar to the film The Howling than it does to his previous works. Howling 3 takes place in the mid-80s, 1 year after the burning of the town of Drago. Now, you might be wondering to yourselves, if you read Howling, wasn't that in the 70s? You'd be correct. I guess this is a different town in California named Drago that's in the same area as the town of Drago. Also now, instead of it being an accident that there was a big fire, which is kind of part of the climax of the first novel, it was done on purpose by the people of Pinion. Why these changes? Well, because it makes sense for his story, which shouldn't have been in Drago. So, in this, some werewolves escaped Drago. More werewolves escaped Drago. Not just the ones that escaped in the second one. More of them. And now there's an alpha werewolf. And then there's a child werewolf who, he's like a teenager. And he doesn't remember who he is. And I guess you can be born as a werewolf. And there's a new third way that werewolves can be killed. Anyway, so the new werewolf is Malcolm. Malcolm's probably the only character worth talking about, because he's the only good character in this, aside from a side character who runs a carnival that ends up being a plot point near the end of this book. But basically, Malcolm escapes the fire. He has amnesia. He doesn't know where he is. And he meets a man in the woods. The man in the woods is killed by hunters on accident. And then Malcolm ends up at a hospital where he meets a psychologist who is the worst character I think I've ever read in a book. She, I believe her name is like Dr. Lang. She has like a thing with the sheriff, who's a nothing burger of a character. And she's just obnoxious and self-righteous and annoying. And he's just useless for the most part. Anyway, Malcolm gets kidnapped by another doctor and experimented on. And then Malcolm escapes. He ends up becoming I can't even say the word. But certain types of services that children should never do are passed around. This is a paragraph in this book. Then he ends up joining a carnival where he just turns into a werewolf. Then he ends up getting loose again after some people are murdered, not by him. And then he has a fight with the alpha werewolf at the end. That's Howling 3. It is probably the most worthless sequel I think I have ever read in my life. Howling 3 was created because Gary Bradner really disliked what Tobe Hooper did with the first Howling movie. He hated that his book was even named as being it being based on his novel. With that being said, the werewolves in this book look a hell of a lot like that movie's werewolves and not like the werewolves in the previous books. So, I know that Gary Bradner helped write Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, one of the most embarrassing sequels that has ever been created in Hollywood. With that being said, I don't know how much of it he contributed, because that thing is so shockingly bad, I don't think it's possible he could have written that. That's worse than Howling 3, but not much more worse. Howling 3 makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. It retcons a bunch of stuff. It adds lore that didn't need to be there. In fact, there should never have been a Howling 3. I think the only reason there is a Howling 3 is he realized he could make some money off of the Howling name still. So he shot together a book called Howling 3. It should have been a totally different werewolf book, and it would have been okay. The fact it's a Howling book makes it, like, worse. It's, like, not fun to read at all. It's kind of miserable, and highly don't recommend it. I would honestly give this probably a 1.6 out of 5. Because there's not even... You don't get the luxury of a lot of werewolf murder, which is what I was hoping for, at the very least. It happens once, like... It feels like once every, like, 100 pages. It's just so little death in this, and it's just not enjoyable. So, anyway, have a good one.